Almost there. Chapter 2. Facilier. Just wait a second there, Tiana, Facilier implored after he collected himself. He forced out a chuckle. Be careful with that. It's an heirloom. He tried to project an air of cool indifference despite the rampant desperation pulsing through his veins. The amulet was the key to everything. As long as it held a sample of Prince Naveen's blood, its designated wearer could take on the prince's appearance. Without it, Facilier's ploy to gain control of Eli LaBouf's fortune through his love-struck daughter Charlotte could crumble. But even more important, he would have to pay the high price his friends on the other side had attached to it. Tiana held his very life in her hands. Facilier clutched his fists at his sides, wishing he could wrap his hands around that gutless Lawrence's neck. Striking up an alliance with the prince's incompetent valet had been more than just a miscalculation on his part. It could prove to be a deadly mistake. Lawrence had allowed Facilier's treasured talisman to fall on Tiana's hands, and because of that he now found himself in a position of weakness, having to make a bargain with this slip of a girl. He should have known Tiana wouldn't take the easy way out when it came to her restaurant. She would never take pride in something she hadn't earned. People like her suffered under the foolish notion that their hard work made them better, made them more deserving than those who were smart enough to take advantage of life's shortcuts. People like him. Even after turning down his offer to get her that restaurant, Facilier had been certain that dangling the prospect of seeing her father again would do the trick. Bringing James back was a tall order and would come at high price, possibly more than he'd ever have to pay to his friends on the other side, but he had been willing to do it. He was willing to do just about anything to secure that talisman, and Tiana had thrown his offer back in his face. He hadn't wanted to resort to this, but she left him no other choice. If he couldn't sweet-talk her into returning his property, intimidation was the only recourse. Before you turn down my proposition, there is still the matter of your little froggy prince to discuss, Facilier said. Naveen? Her eyes widened. It was exactly the reaction he'd hoped for. He had a feeling that she'd fallen in love with that prince. It would be her downfall. Where is he? Tiana asked. Where's Naveen? Don't you worry about where he is. You need to think about what he is. You might be willing to give up your dreams, but will you give up his in the process? Facilier continued. If you want your precious Naveen to ever become human again, you'll better give me what's mine. You're lying, Tiana shook her head. All Naveen has to do to turn human again is to kiss a princess, and Charlotte LaBouf is a princess because her daddy is the king of Mardi Gras. Come on now, Facilier hissed. You're smarter than that. You know Miss LaBouf isn't a real princess, and neither are you. If Naveen doesn't kiss himself a real princess by midnight, he will live forever as a frog. No, Tiana gasped. Yes. He detected the teeniest signal that she was starting to waver and pounced. But you can save him, Tiana. You can get everything you ever wanted. You and your prince can... He stopped. What was he thinking? Naveen was his ticket to Eli LaBouf and the most powerful man in New Orleans. Now that the scheme he crafted with Lawrence had fallen apart, Facilier needed the real Naveen to continue a courtship with LaBouf's daughter. An eventual marriage between these two was still his best shot at gaining control over LaBouf's money. He should have focused on the prince from the very beginning instead of partnering with that spineless Lawrence. That devil-may-care attitude of his made Naveen an easy one to manipulate. As long as he could keep getting a drop of Naveen's blood every so often, he could control him. But that would never happen if Naveen and Tiana were together. Almost everything you ever wanted, I should say. Here's my offer, Facilier started. You hand me that talisman. In return, I'll bring your daddy back. And I'll make your little prince human again. He held up a finger. There's just one thing. Once the spell is broken, Naveen won't remember a single thing about any of this. If you want him to remain a human, the little dalliance between you two can be no more. Are you saying... I'm saying that you must forfeit the love of your sweet Prince Naveen in return for him being human again? She gasped. But that's not fair. Life isn't fair, Facilier snapped. Where was the fairness in what he now faced? He would have to strike yet another bargain with his friends on the other side in order to deliver everything he'd promised her. The price would undoubtedly be high, putting him in even deeper debt to them. And what was she sacrificing? Her little infatuation with the Dunderhead prince? He was doing her a favor. According to Lawrence, Naveen was useless, a broke, lazy burden to his parents. He could only hold Tiana back. Without Naveen weighing her down, and with the help of her father, once Facilier bargained for James' return, Tiana would have a restaurant in no time at all. Compare that to what he was getting out of this deal, nothing. But wait a minute. Maybe there was more in it for him. Facilier thought about the small vial in his jacket pocket that contained a tincture he whipped up for some of his more stubborn clientele. It made those who consumed it more malleable to his wishes, at least for a little while. If he could convince Tiana to add a bit of it to her gumbo, he could manipulate all who ate it into giving him whatever valuables they had in their possession. Facilier's lips curled up in a smile as something else occurred to him. Tiana and LaBeouf's daughter, Charlotte, were thick as thieves. It stood to reason that Eli LaBeouf would become a loyal patron of any restaurant Tiana eventually opened. If he could get even a drop of this tincture into LaBeouf himself, it could be another avenue to get to the sugar baron should his plan with Naveen fall through. Another way to fill his coffers. A failsafe. The possibilities were too delicious to contemplate. But first he had to convince Tiana. Before we go any further, I need to consult my friends on the other side, Facilier said. You understand, don't you? He closed his eyes, leaving a short sliver open so that he could keep Tiana in his sights. When he began to speak gibberish, yammering like a baby, he would make the bargain with his friends on the other side once he returned to his shop. But Tiana had to believe he was making the deal for her daddy here and now. He put on a stellar show, if he did say so himself. Yes, Facilier said. What are they saying? Tiana asked. He held up a finger, silencing her. Oh, of course, yes, it's very reasonable, Facilier murmured. That shouldn't be a problem at all. He added more gibberish for good measure, then made a production of releasing himself from his trance. He belonged to a vaudeville stage with that performance. Facilier settled his gaze on Tiana yet again. My friends on the other side have named their price. You are very lucky, Tiana. It's hardly anything at all. He produced the vial from his pocket. In return for making your froggy prince human again, and for bringing your dear father James back to life, all you have to do is add a small drop of this potion to your gumbo once you inevitably open your restaurant. After all, your hard work helps you do so. Tiana was instantly suspicious. What's in it? Well, he needed to think fast. Well, you know better than anyone that gumbo was your father's signature dish. I've had some of James' gumbo a time or two myself. He rubbed his stomach. Delicious stuff. What does that have to do with whatever that is in this little bottle there? This contains the magic that will keep your daddy alive. What better way to do it than through his gumbo? You see, Tiana, that's just how my friends on the other side operate. It's poetic in a way, isn't it? How do I know you're even talking to those friends of yours a minute ago? She asked. Why should I trust you at all, Shadow Man? This was exactly why he couldn't trust her around Naveen. She was too smart for her own good. Because we can both benefit from this, Tiana. You have something I want, and I can provide something that you want. How do I know whatever you have in that vial won't kill anyone who drinks it? Facilier chuckled. If that's what my friends wanted to do, they could have done that a long time ago. He tipped the vial to his lips, pretending to take a sip. It's harmless, he said. What's it supposed to do exactly? Facilier held up his hands. I don't question my friends, Tiana, and neither should you. Their magic is 1,000 times more powerful than mine. If they say that a tiny drop of this in your gumbo will keep your father alive, then you need to trust them. Sensing the need for extra insurance, Facilier added, and don't forget about Naveen. You're saving him along with all the people you love. You can make sure no harm comes to any of them, Tiana. Her eyes widened with alarm. What do you mean by that? All the people I love? Accidents happen all the time. Facilier hunched his shoulders. Are you threatening me? she asked, her voice once again strident with staunch defiance. I'm warning you, he snapped. Things will get very, very ugly if you choose to ignore such a generous offer. He could tell she was starting to waver. He waved a hand, and one by one phantom versions of Tiana's loved ones appeared in the air. Her mother, that maddening prince, the LaBeouf girl, the neighbor she'd grown up with, and one by one the figures crumbled, lying lifeless on the invisible floor. Tiana gasped as the apparitions disappeared. Facilier moved in closer. So, do we have a deal? You're not giving me much of a choice, are you? Either I make this deal with you or innocent people will be hurt. We all have choices to make, Tiana. The question is whether or not we're prepared to face the consequences of those choices. She defiantly thrust her chin in the air and held her shoulders back, but Facilier saw through her bravado. He was back in control. She might have held his life in her hands, but she didn't know that. That was his ace. Tiana's not knowing about how much power that talisman possessed. What's it gonna be, Tiana? She glared at him with burning anger in her eyes, but Facilier knew he'd back her into a corner. If I have to give up Naveen, there are several things I want in return, Tiana said. Even when she had no way out, she still drove a hard bargain. In a way, he could admire that. It was too bad she was such a goody two-shoes. With her gumption, Tiana could help him take over this entire city. What is it you want? He asked. You have to promise that my family will be safe. I don't want any harm coming to them. She hesitated for a moment and then said, and you have to help my two friends, Louis and Ray. Louis wants to be a human so he can play with a jazz band in the music halls in New Orleans. Either your friends make that happen or no deal. And Ray, well, I would feel better knowing that he's close by, where I can keep an eye on him, that he's safe. Facilier interrupted her. I'm afraid it won't be necessary. He almost felt sorry for Tiana as her forehead dipped into a confused frown. Almost. What do you mean? She asked. Remember what I said about our choices having consequences? He arched one brow. Well, your little firefly sealed his fate when he stole my talisman. Her face fell as understanding dawned. Tiana clutched her hands in her chest. Oh, Ray, she cried. But the gator, Facilier continued with a shrug. I'll have a talk with my friends, but I'm pretty sure I can make that happen. You can assure me that whatever is in that vial won't harm anyone. That is simply the magic that will keep my daddy alive and keep my family safe. There's nothing simple about this magic, except for your part in this, of course. You just remember to put a drop of it in your gumbo, and no harm will come to anyone. And you and your dear father will be cooking once again. Facilier squeezed his hands at his sides as he leaned forward, his excitement on the verge of overwhelming. So, Tiana, do we have a deal? She pressed her lips together. For dear old Dad, he continued. For a moment, a streak of true terror rushed through him at the reluctance she saw in her eyes. But then Tiana stuck out the hand that held his talisman. Deal,